Hi, and welcome to the third SFWA Chat Hour. If you're not familiar with what SFWA is, it is the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. We're a 50-year-old organization advocating for professional genre writers. And today we will be talking with SFWA, I think it's pretty much all SFWA board members in this particular chat. And this one's going to be particularly interesting because we'll be revealing news of the game writing decision, details of it that have never before been revealed in public. So I want to go around and start with introductions. And so if people would say who you are and what you do for SFWA, I'm Kat Rambo, and I'm the SFWA president, and I'm about to start the second year of my reign of terror. And one of my accompanying cohorts is Bud Sparhawk, who will now introduce himself.
I'm Bud Sparhawk, the Chief Financial Officer of SFWA, and I've been in this role for 400 years and looking to get out fairly soon. That's about it.
I'm Jennifer Brezek. I'm one of the directors at large. I'm about to start my second year, I guess. And then one of the things that I did from almost the moment I joined SFWA years ago was try to get game writers into SFWA. So I'm actually really, really happy that this happened.
And you've been one of the people on the game writing committee for quite some time, along with Matthew Johnson, who were sort of troubleshooting behind the scenes. There we go. There you are. Hi, Matthew. Yay. One thing I will suggest, remember to mute when you're not talking, because otherwise we'll end up with echo. But Matthew, you are at an opportune time, because we'd love to have you introduce yourself and say what it is that you do for SFWA right now before we start talking about the game writing decision. And you're currently muted.
There we go.
There you go.
So yeah, I'm Matthew Johnson, and I'm one of the directors at large on the SFWA board. But I'm here today because I was also the board liaison for the game writing committee, which came up with recommendations to the board on how to accept game writing as a path to qualification in SFWA membership, and also how SFWA can better serve members who do write for games, whether those are members who joined under the other qualifications or potential members who join under the new ones.
So how long was the committee talking about this? I mean, I don't think people realize how long this decision has been in the works. So, like, I mean, because I've got a number of questions that I think people will have about it, but just like, how long did it take?
Well, sorry, I was like, I've been in SFWA for 6 years, and almost, like, literally within the first 2 months of me being part of it, there was a game writing committee putting together the document for the first recommendation to SFWA with Chris, whose last name I can never say. It's J. I don't remember his last name. I'm very sorry about that.
We'll add it to the information when it goes up on YouTube. And Matthew, how long have you been involved with it? Have you been 6 years?
The current iteration of the committee is about, I guess, a little more than a year, because we sort of, it became a live issue again after the self-pub qualifications went through, and I think a lot of people were, I think a lot of people in general approved of that and felt that we were really helping to bring the organization up to date, and that we were sort of doing ourselves a disservice by not even looking at the idea of game writing. So, we knew that, as with self-publishing, we knew that there had been issues raised in the past. There had been reasons why it hadn't gone forward, or indeed, in the case of game writing, why the membership in the past had voted against it. So, we knew to a certain extent that we had to consider those, and it took us about a year, as I said, to come up with something that we felt that the board and the membership would feel was reasonable, and I'm happy to say that we had really, really strong support at both levels, so that we did have that board vote, or the membership-wide vote, in favor of it.
So let's talk a little bit about kind of how the self-publishing decision, and for folks that aren't familiar with that, last year in May, SFWA opened up the membership qualifications so people can qualify through independently publishing or through small press publishing, which wasn't always the case. It used to have to go through the larger publishers. So could you talk a little bit about how you see that decision leading to this, and then let's go to Jen, and she may have another take on that as well.
Well, from my perspective, you know, the self-publishing qualifications were the first major change in how you could join SFWA in really a long time, as long as I've been a member. And, you know, I don't want to put it in terms of opening the floodgates, but I think it did make us, a lot of us, look at the industry in a new way. Look at the question of whether we were, you know, unjustly leaving out kinds of writing, forms of writing and publishing that we should have included. And I think also there is maybe a bigger overlap in the self-publishing or indie publishing community with gaming. So I know that quite a few of the people who joined under the self-publishing qualifications were also involved in gaming, and so I think that helped to make it a live issue as well.
And Jen, because you've got a significant amount of game writing experience.
Well, Matthew's absolutely right. In the last 5 years, the publishing industry has changed so much that writers are doing all kinds of different writing. They're doing game writing, they're doing video game writing, they're doing self-published writing, they're working with small press. And it was a terrible thing to write 70,000 words on a book, get paid more than $2,000 for that book, and then be told you are not a professional. And that is one of the reasons a lot of people did start self-publishing, is because they had a built-in audience. Gamers love to read, and self-published people, they work super hard. They know the business. They know the different silos you can do for marketing, for using social media. And I thought it was a tragedy that we couldn't bring them into SFWA to bring in all that new information to help the old guard. And that was one of the things that I thought should happen. The more you work in publishing, especially with game writers, because we're all over the place. And we have these different audiences, and we could mix and match the audiences when, you know, people who like my young adult sci-fi stuff also find out that they like my Shadowrun stuff and my BattleTech stuff. And it was just one of those things that I thought, and then it was all about bringing in the information, because the biggest part was a lot of people didn't know what game writers did, and if you've never done it, you don't understand doing tabletop writing or video game writing and how difficult, and you know, the profession behind it. So that's, yeah, I know that the game writing had been voted against twice, and I don't know if I don't think I was in SFWA during that time. But I think the more information we brought and the changing publication market really brought it to the forefront.
Well, that's, Bud, you're somebody, I think of all of us, you're the one who's been in SFWA the longest, and I think you may remember when this has come up for a vote before. Do you remember kind of what the attitudes were and kind of what may have changed to your mind, and that has made it, because this time when we voted, it was pretty overwhelmingly, I think, in favor of it, if I'm remembering correctly. Matthew's nodding, so I'm remembering correctly.
Well, I have a hard time remembering last week, much less years ago. But as best I remember it, I think it was the entrenched people who were strictly going by print media and print books. Very strong control, and didn't have very many minority voices out there who were doing otherwise. There was a minimum number of people who were in gaming at all at that time. So it was kind of, better we stick with what we know and so forth. I think what's happened over the years is there's been a greater appreciation for the variety of writing that is going on and what constitutes a professional as opposed to a lucky amateur, not to mention any names.
Well, one of the things I'm curious about, so I'd first like to hear Jen talk about what she thinks SFWA offers the game writer, and then I'd like Matthew to talk about what he thinks the game writers are going to offer SFWA, because I'm pretty sure that these are things that both of you have thought long and hard about. So Jen, as someone who does games, why should game writers care about this? Why should they be at all remotely interested in joining?
Well, okay, the biggest reason is community, and well, there's actually a lot of reasons. GriefCom is a huge thing. Gaming has grown very fast over the last 10 years, and there are some companies that aren't as professional as other companies, especially when paying their people. And sometimes you need some help to get paid. There's a couple of companies that never paid me. There's a couple of companies that took 2 years to pay me for something. If I had GriefCom behind me at the time, and just the fact that I could say I'm a member of SFWA and I have this thing called GriefCom could have kicked them in the butt to actually stop disrespecting game writers as a professional. But the community of professional writers, with the amount of information we have, one of the biggest questions I get as a professional game writer and editor, as well as a traditional published author, is how do you do it? How do you get yourself out there? Another thing that people ask me is, how do you get nominated for awards? And the more I talk with other SFWA members and do so in a professional capacity, or I'm always on the forums. I'm a huge lurker. I don't talk a lot, but I read a lot. I read what you write. And I kind of absorb it. The amount of information and community that game writers can get from SFWA, a base of operations at conventions. Sometimes it's very daunting for a game writer to go to, like Worldcon or World Fantasy Con, and there's a SFWA room there where you can go and meet other people and sometimes hide from the crowds and just be like, there is someone else here who understands. What else? Right? Between the forums, the community, GriefCom, the EMF, when I finally get that much more, once we get that much more transparent, that will be something for game writers. There are very few professional organizations for game writers who understand how difficult it is to write in someone else's world. Even if you created that world, I mean, once it's out in the public and you have multiple writers, it's not yours anymore. And when you have the tie-in writers and you have the self-published writers, and a lot of times game writers have to do their own marketing, the members of SFWA can give them the information they need to help them do effective marketing without being a pain in the butt. Effective networking without being a pain in the butt, or doing something really horrendously wrong where you are considered unprofessional, uncouth, and just not worth working with. And there's a lot to be learned. We talk about the old guard, but the thing about the old guard is they have that experience. I love talking to the older members of SFWA because they'll talk about something that happened behind the scenes where you're just like, oh, that's what happens. And that's, I think, the most invaluable thing a game writer can do is talk to a person within SFWA you can kind of pull back the curtain and say, well, this is actually how it really works. And that's kind of my off-the-cuff thoughts.
Okay, and that's awesome. And that's to kind of gloss two things that you mentioned. GriefCom is the SFWA grievance committee, which basically works behind the scenes to resolve issues that people are having with publishers or agents or others, publishing industry folks. And the reason that you sometimes don't hear a lot about them is that secrecy and kind of the threat of hey, we're going to go public with this is among their many weapons. And the other thing you mentioned is the EMF, which is the Emergency Medical Fund, which is there to help members who are hit with medical difficulties that are affecting their careers, in which Jen is in the process of, trying to revamp and make more transparent to our members, because one of the complaints in the past has been that it's been sort of a black box where, it's like, I apply and then, I don't know, Martians descend and hear my case, and, which is maybe accurate, maybe not, I don't know. Matthew, so what are you hoping SFWA's going to get out of the game writers?
I think there's a number of things. I mean, SFWA as an organization, like I said, I think it gains a lot of relevance. Because gaming is a huge industry. It is really on par with Hollywood, and obviously not all of that is narrative gaming. A lot of that has a fairly small or non-existent narrative aspect, but still, most of the really big games have an element of narrative. They have writers involved, whether it's just writing dialogue, whether it's doing design, at all sorts of levels, and so I feel that not including that really in the same way that we were in danger of making ourselves irrelevant by not including self-publishing, I think that really made us run the risk of becoming irrelevant or seeming irrelevant. So just on the bottom line, I think we had a duty to the organization to do this. But for the members, I think there's two really big things that game writers can bring. And one is information about that market, because I think there are a lot of writers today who would be interested in game writing, but just because of how they got into writing, they don't know much about it. They don't know much about who the players are. They don't know how you find work in game writing. They don't know about the industry. I know I don't know that much about it. But a lot of people like me grew up playing video games. Maybe they'd be really interested in writing. So one of the wonderful things about SFWA is that the members are so generous with their knowledge. Generally speaking, we don't see each other as competitors. We're happy to share the information that we have about how to get work, about which markets are good, maybe which markets to avoid or which markets to be cautious about. So I think that's going to be a huge benefit for a lot of members. On the level of craft, I think there's a lot to learn from game writers because it's such an interesting challenge, particularly when you are looking at games that have a significant narrative, because it really challenges our idea of what a good story is. Because a good story, the classic conventional wisdom is that a good story should be inevitable. But you can't write that way when you're writing a game, otherwise you have one good ending and 9 disappointing endings. I actually kind of backed into game writing because I write educational games for my day job. It's a small part of my day job, but I've done it a number of times. And they do tend to have a narrative because they're teaching kids about the internet and about being ethical online and that kind of thing. So it's been a real challenge for me, and it's been a really wonderful learning experience to try to make sure that each of the paths that the player chooses are meaningful, and they're all equally meaningful, equally successful as stories. And that's really just the tip of the iceberg. So I think all of the things that SFWA has done in the past, whether it's sharing information about craft, sharing information about markets, sharing information about best and worst practices, game writers have a huge amount to contribute in all those areas.
Well, and I think I was at a seminar a number of months ago where Dave Farland and James Owen were talking about how writers, often you want to think about your world you want to think about your books in terms of what other properties can you spin out of it. You know, can you take your game world? I mean, I keep wanting to say game world, but the world of your novel, and can you make like a RPG out of it, or even just a little web game to promote it, or you know, can you make cool jewelry based on the magic runes that you know is the system that everybody's using and stuff like that. And so I think that for some folks, for people who particularly have established worlds where they say have, you know, 10, 15, God knows how many stories and novels set in it, how do they turn that into a game? How do they reach, in fact, new readers? How do they gather new fans for the series through games? And I think that's another thing that I'm hoping to learn, because I've got a game, I've got a world, a novel world. The problem is mine started as a game world. It started as a MUD, and so that never saw daylight. So it's yearning to become a game. All right, so I'm digressing, but I should not. I want to talk about, so first I want to talk about the criteria, because this is the thing that everybody is curious about. What are the criteria? How do we judge this? And so, Matthew, do you have them handy? Will you read them? Do you?
Yeah, I do. Oh, I could read them out, but it's kind of it's kind of technical. But you know, this was the most challenging part, I think, because the field of game writing is so diverse. It's much more diverse than prose writing in terms of the ways that people do business and the ways that people get paid. And you know, that's another one of the reasons why we couldn't really do this until we had done self-publishing. Because that, again, it opened up different models of showing that you've been paid a professional rate, or that you've earned a professional rate, and also crowdfunding as well, because you know that got kind of overshadowed by the self-pub, that we included crowdfunding as a revenue stream, as a qualification. But we know that's hugely important in games, for indie games. It's probably I would say much more important in games than in prose writing. So what we kind of ended up doing was we split the differences. Essentially, you have 4 different ways of showing that you've earned a professional rate. And the first one is what you need to do if you can show that there's been if you can show that there's a set word count. Because one of the issues, of course, is in prose, there's a word count. You always have a word count, and we start from that under the regular qualifications. Sometimes in games you can come up with a word count, and sometimes you can't. So there's sort of a little decision tree, and the first one goes to, well, do you have a word count? And if you do have a word count, then you can qualify either as though it were prose, under the same per word rates, or for if it's sort of the equivalent of a short story, or the same lump sum if it were the equivalent of a novel. So it's, in that case, it's tied to the word rates for short fiction, or the advanced rate for novels. And so whenever we change those in the future, the gaming rates will change accordingly. And the second option was to show income under the self-pub or crowdfunding rules. So you can take that option and just say, here's this game, and it fits the other criteria, that is to say it's a narrative game and it's got a speculative element, and it's earned X amount, and again that's tied to those other 2. And finally, the third one is to treat it as a script, essentially, because we do have our first non-prose qualifications that have been around for a long time are the ones for scripts. And so essentially, if you can't show that it has a word count, we treat it as a dramatic script. And there's lots of little complications in there, but those are fundamentally the 3 different ways that you can qualify. So we wanted to make it as broad as possible without compromising our qualifications. And we knew that was really important, that it's not necessarily any easier to join as a game writer than it is as a prose writer or a script writer, and that's why it's tied to those 3. But at the same time, we wanted to make sure that we weren't excluding people who legitimately should be able to qualify.
Okay. And you mentioned Kickstarter, and it occurs to me that's one of the values that we add, and this is kind of recent news, but we now have a Kickstarter liaison, and at Worldcon she will be doing a session in the SFWA suite where she'll come in and chat with members about Kickstarter. And she's also offered to do a webinar series for us aimed at SFWA members, which includes at the end, and I think this is the very coolest part, she will critique your prospective Kickstarter and offer tips. And this is someone who's seen literally maybe thousands of Kickstarters go through, so I'm pretty sure they'll be able to give really good advice as far as that goes. So Jen, let's say I'm a prospective game writer, not a prospective game writer, I'm a game writer who's a prospective SFWA member, and I have listened to this and I am afire with glee and eager to apply. What are you going to tell me?
I'm going to tell you that next Thursday we are going to post the actual criteria. If you want to join SFWA as a game writer, the first thing you should do is, well, there's actually a couple of things to do. One, figure out why you want to join SFWA. What is it that you want to get out of it? That's the first thing. And explore the SFWA website. There's a lot of resources already out there before being a member. Second, read the criteria. The criteria will tell you whether or not you qualify. And what is your goal to qualify? I know that's one of the things as a professional writer. I was like, okay, I want to be a member of SFWA. I want to get my 3 professional sales, or I want to get my professional novel out there. The next thing you should do is going to the SFWA website, which is SFWA.org. There is an application under the Join SFWA heading. You click on that link and you follow the questionnaire. Kate put together a really wonderful questionnaire, and if you have questions, the directors at large, I know Matthew's online, I'm online, I know all my game writer friends are going to be like, okay, Jen, tell me what I need to do. And my answer will be, go to this first URL, go to the second URL. Read the rules. You're gamers. You know how to read rules. If you have questions after that, then we can address them one by one. A lot of members of SFWA are super excited about this, and you don't have to come to a director. You can come to any member of SFWA, and if they don't know the answer, they're going to point you at somebody. Most likely me or Matthew or someone else who was on the committee. But the website will be the best place to go, and there will be an official announcement. And I know I'm going to put it on my social media. SFWA will have it on their social media, and there'll be a lot of us will be kind of singing from the rooftops because we're all really excited for this. So yeah.
That's how you can tell the changes that we're really, really excited about, is you'll have this flood of people or something like, hurrah! I mean, and that was kind of one of the nice things when we took in the indie folks. Suddenly there was a lot of people mentioning that. So anything else that people should know about the game writing decision before we meander on to other topics? Either Jen or Matt, you got anything else you want to tell people about game writing? Bud, you don't play games other than solitaire, so I don't want to hear anything more from you on this. All right, Jen or Matt, either of you?
I'm just going to say I really hope that we do get interest. You know, it was really gratifying last year when there were so many people from the indie pub community who were keen to join, and I think we've had great response. And you know, we're still learning as an organization how best to serve our self-publishing members. And one of the things that I think all of us here have said at one time or another is that, you know, so much of what you get out of SFWA depends on what you put in, and so we're always looking for members to tell us what we can do. To tell us, particularly when it's something, yeah, that came out wrong. To tell when it, when it's an industry where most of us on the board, with Jen, I think is the exception, and maybe Maggie, don't have much experience in the industry side of games, even if we play games, and so we do really rely on our members to let us know what the issues are and what SFWA can help them with.
Jen, anything you want to add to that? There you go.
I'd just like to say welcome. I'm super excited. It was like one of my I really wanted to get the game writers in. It was like one of the very first conversations I had with John Scalzi, and he's like, you have to wait until we do this thing in California. And then I actually ran during my first year to become the director of Pacific Northwest. I lost, which is actually probably a good thing because I know a lot more now, and just welcome. Please don't hesitate to ask me. I'm Jennifer Brozick everywhere on social media. If you want to join, I'm going to have probably a little mini FAQ where I'm just going to, you're going to ask me the question, I'm just going to have a cut and paste for you. So as soon as we know it, you guys will know it.
Awesome. And also, to me, from me also, a huge welcome. I'm a longtime gamer and love gaming deeply, and so I think this is immensely gratifying. I wanted to move on to a couple of convention reports. I just did the Locus weekend here in Seattle, which was lots of fun. Featured a great many Hawaiian shirts, and Connie Willis being her usual toast mastery self, and Nancy Kress heckling her. And this year Nancy wore a great many costumes, so that was interesting. How often do you get to be at an event where you have Nancy Kress dressed up as Hannibal Lecter harassing Connie Willis wearing a Hawaiian shirt? It's just one of those moments you're like, oh, this is a surreal sort of profession. And then I wanted to mention that at WesterCon, which is coming up this weekend in Portland, there will be a SFWA meeting on Monday, July 4th, because obviously that's what you want to be doing on July 4th, is coming to hear about SFWA, from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., where we will be talking about kind of what's going on, and I hope some interesting stuff, and I hope there will be light refreshments. I promise there'll be at least chocolate that I will fling at people if you show up for it. But one of the reasons I wanted to mention it is if you have questions about SFWA, you don't need to be a member to show up. Come and have questions, because we're always ready to answer them, because we got lots of exciting stuff going on. I want Jen to talk about the cool con that she was at, StokerCon. You were at StokerCon in Origins Game Fair. So tell us about that. How was it?
StokerCon was put on by the Horror Writers Association, which is the horror writers version of SFWA. It was in Las Vegas. I was actually up for a Bram Stoker Award there, so it was very exciting. I lost, it happens. But it was the first year that the Horror Writers Association put on StokerCon as a convention specifically for the Stoker Awards, and that will be going forward. Next year, it will be in Long Beach, at the Queen Mary, the most haunted boat in pretty much the United States. And if you're interested that the Stokers will be there, you do not have to be a member to go to the award ceremony. And the convention is already open for attendees for buying memberships. And much like World Horror Con and Worldcon, it is a membership you are buying. It is not a ticket. And then I was at Origins Game Fair this last week. And that is the industry gaming convention that's more for industry side of things rather than the fan side of things. The big fan one is Gen Con coming up in August. Origins Game Fair had 16,000 people. There were some very interesting things that we noticed market-wise. While our sales were about on par for 2014 and 2015. We noticed that there was about an 88% cash buy. Almost everybody bought books with cash, rather than last year where it was more than 50% credit and on Square and such. So that was just a really interesting marketing industry thing for me to note, that people are on budgets and they're using cash a lot more than Square. So that's something, those of you who sell at conventions, make sure you have enough change. Also at Origins Game Fair, there was the Origins Awards, and this year we had multiple non-American winners. The German or Slavic winner of the Game of the Year was Codenames, and nobody could actually pronounce the designer's name. It was kind of amusing in a way like that. But Origins is growing every year. It had 16,000 people. Gen Con, yeah, 16 is actually bigger than it normally is. You started at about 10. Gen Con, you're going to expect the big day at 60 to 70,000 on Saturday, and then these are good. Origins and Game Fairs are really good gaming conventions. For those of you who are interested in game writing, these are the conventions you want to go to network with the publishers and the editors. That's what I want to recommend. Origins Game Fair in Columbus, Ohio, and Gen Con in, I'm not going this year because I can't remember where it is, Indianapolis.
This year I'll be at Gen Con
Yeah.
for the first time. I want, it makes me feel so old. The last time I was at Origins would have been 1978, when I was in high school, when it was just an itty-bitty convention right at the local college, and it was just kind of a bunch of classrooms that we took over and played games at. So, all right, there's your nostalgic moment for today. So I wanted to talk about what we're reading, and I was going to start with Bud. Bud, do you have books that you're reading right now that you wanted to enthuse about or give a special shout out to?
Well, this sounds terrible, but I finally got around to reading Hild by Nicola Griffin.
Oh, so good, so good.
And I am just fascinated by the language in there. And the amount of research that has gone into that thing is just incredible. And despite the fact that it's not really my cup of tea, I can't put the damn thing down. I just have to read, well, one more chapter. I'll just read another chapter, and on and on. But I am enjoying it immensely.
And you're somebody who reads one book at a time. So are you immersed in Hild? You don't have anything else that you're dipping into?
No, my guilt pile is too high. I reached down there because I said, oh my God, you know, I haven't read her for a long time. I better dig it out and see what's going on. No, I read mostly magazines and online. So, yeah, I'm not a novelist at heart.
Was there any recent fiction online that you wanted to, now, actually, I'm going to say you and I have an announcement because we have a story that we wrote together coming out July 1st.
We have a novella that started off as a very short story that became a novelette that turned into a novella, and then we trimmed it back down by about 12,000 words to where we could actually sell the damn thing. But yeah, it started off interestingly enough. Kat and I were sitting across from each other at the Nebula. She was up for an award for a story.
You muted, Bud.
Sorry. I said,
no worries.
We were sitting across the table at the Nebulous, and Kat was sort of jittery across there, trying to keep her seat dry, and I leaned across and I said, well, let me break it. I said, hey, Kat, want to collaborate on a story? And she says, hell yes, let's do it. And I said, okay, how about a haunted spaceship? And she said, sounds good. And over the next few weeks, as I was traveling around the western United States and going through the redwood forest and all, ideas kept occurring to me, and I kept writing snippets, and Kat started writing snippets, and then she threw a damn cat into the story appropriately, and that kind of changed the dimension. And then we started world building, and the world building kind of got out of hand, I think. And we kept going and going, and neither of us knew how this thing was going to end up. And it ended in a place that
You've muted again.
I don't know how that's happening.
I don't know if I'm doing it inadvertently somehow when I'm unmuting myself.
Yeah.
So go
anyway,
ahead. Sorry.
It ended up in a place that neither of us expected, and it should be quite surprising to a number of people in the hard SF world. I'll let Kat talk to the other world.
Well, it was interesting because our process is so different, and my understanding of your process, which I'm still somewhat dazed by afterwards, is that you write the whole thing chronologically, and then you go back and rearrange it. So that's what we did, was we wrote it chronologically, and then we kept kind of rearranging it, and which, given that it was a story about kind of a gradual descent into madness, was somehow fitting as the story became more and more unmoored in time. But no, that was a fun story to write. It was a fun story.
Actually, I wrote about 120% of the story, and Kat was a little slaggard. She only wrote 105%.
Yeah, that is sadly accurate. And yeah, no, that was fun. It was a fun story. I don't know. And you and Swirsky, right? You and Swirsky are writing a story together right now.
As a matter of fact, I've got a message from her right now that she's suddenly had another flash of ideas that I've got to figure out how to deal with. So, yeah.
Very cool. Okay, yeah. Cool. Hey, Jen, so what have you read lately that you want to tout? And now that Bud and I have successfully self-promoted, do you have anything that you want to give a shout-out to? Go ahead.
I am one of those people who read multiple books at a time. Right now I'm reading View from the Cheap Seats by Neil Gaiman, which is a really great nonfiction book I'm writing. It's a nonfiction book that kind of really explores Neil's career through his life through all of the essays he wrote, and I'm enjoying that a lot. I just picked up Rise, the novella by, the collection by Mary Grant, who is also Sean McGuire. And interestingly enough, while I'm not as fond of the Newsflash series, because I don't particularly like zombies, even though I write zombies from time to time, I love her short fiction and the other world stories in the world. She just writes so well. So those are the two I've really got on top right now. And then I've got this comic book I'm reading called My Life in Japan, a comic book by a YouTuber called Texan in Tokyo. And I backed her Kickstarter because she's just really sweet, and she's got this American perspective, and she lives in rural Japan with her husband, and I just very much enjoyed it. Now, short fiction. Carrie Vaughn wrote a story on Tor.com called The Games That We Played. And when I read that story, I mean, I didn't actually mean to click on the story when I was going through Tor.com. And I was having a bad day, and it was long, and I had so much to do. Just the opening paragraph just sort of sucked me in, and I could not stop reading. So I really highly recommend Tor.com, The Games That We Play, by Carrie Vaughn. So there you go. That's what I'm reading.
Awesome. Matthew, how about you?
Well, I'm heavily in research mode right now for a book that I'm hoping to start actually writing in a month or so. So that's where most of my reading is right now. So right now I'm reading upstairs. I'm reading Patrick Leigh Fermore's memoir of walking from Holland to Istanbul in the 1930s. It was was published in 3 parts. The third one was posthumous. And the one I'm still reading, volume 1, which is Time of Gifts, and really fun. I had already read some of his travel books about Greece, so he's really an interesting writer, and had a very interesting life. He came to prominence by being part of a guerrilla group in Crete in World War II, who successfully captured a German general and then bonded with him over quotations from Homer. And downstairs I'm reading a book called Anne the Word, which is about Anne Lee, who was the sort of the prophetess of the Shakers. She's not actually the founder of Shakerism, but she was the one who led them to America and basically was responsible for them becoming a movement rather than just dying out, which is what happened to them in England. But there's a number of fiction books I'm really champing at the bit to read when I get time to them. So I'm really waiting to read Emma Newman's Planetfall and Ada Palmer's Too Like the Lightning, which I'm really excited about, and also Guy Gabriel Kay's new book, Children of Earth and Sky, which I partly want to read because I want to make sure it's not too close to the book that I'm about to start, but also just because I love all of his stuff, and just the texture in his work is always so amazing.
I didn't know he had a new book out, so I'm excited to hear that. Actually,
Yeah,
just
came out last month.
last chat session, Bud gave a shout out to the Palmer book because he really loved it, and I bumped it up on my to be read list. But I mean, I just came up in Locus Awards. They give you books, right? And then there was a freebie book table which we all descended on like vultures, and so I came home with a huge armload of stuff. A couple things go ahead.
I was just going to say my back still hasn't forgiven me for standing in line for 2 hours in the TSA line after the Nebulas in my backpack full of books.
Oh God, yeah,
I'm still recovering from that.
Well, and they had like the Nebulas. There was not just one free book table, but there were 2. So you just felt like, oh, I'm helping them if I take it. Oh, look, there's the new Richard Godrey. Yeah, it was crazy. But this was similar. I just finished, weirdly enough, my father-in-law and I swap books back and forth, and I give him military science fiction, and he gives me other stuff, various kinds. He gave me my first Bernard Cornwell book, which I had never read, which is military fiction, and I read Sharpe's Eagle, which I really enjoyed. I do like military stuff quite a bit, actually. And it was fun because I'm teaching a class on description, and I was able to actually, I pulled out some passages I talked about in class. My friend Todd at the Locus Awards got this book, which I intend to try and either borrow or steal from him, but he got the new Stephen Graham Jones novel, Mongrels. And Stephen Graham Jones is here teaching this week at Clarion West, and is just one of my favorite writers who I highly recommend. He has one of the best short stories of all time, which I'm not going to say anything about but the title because I don't want to spoil it, but it's called Father, Son, Holy Rabbit. And he's going to get tired of hearing me gush about this story, but it is the most, yeah, it's just, you should go read it. And the other thing I got was a new James Blaylock book while I was at Locus Awards, and I love James Blaylock because he was doing steampunk back before steampunk was popular with a lot of his stuff. He's got, do you guys know James Blaylock? He's going to tell you if you like textured stuff. He's got a very kind of Victorian flavor, very whimsical. I always kind of associate him with Tim Powers at his most whimsical. All right, well, let me look at, oh, we have a viewer question, and we had 2 viewer questions. Hooray, thank you, Bishop, for sending in viewer questions. We've covered one of them, which is the game writing stuff, but I had also mentioned that we might talk about our favorite ice cream, so Bishop contributed a question regarding ice cream, which is, before we can even begin speaking to our favorite ice cream, is ice cream or sherbet? So, ice cream or sherbet? Bud Sparhawk, go.
Goat ice cream.
Good ice cream.
Goat. G-O-A-T.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
lactose intolerant.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I totally forgot that. So for you, this is a matter of life or death.
Yes.
Okay. Jen, sherbet or ice cream?
Definitely ice cream.
Definitely ice cream. Okay. And so far, the ice cream's leading. Matthew, are you going to be our rogue, or are you going to go with the crowd?
No, I have to go with ice cream here too. I don't mind sherbet, but by preference, definitely ice cream.
Okay. See, this is, and I am also going to vote for ice cream because the thing that spurred me to add this to the agenda was we just got an ice cream maker. So I've been experimenting with flavors. So round two, favorite flavor for Bud Sparhawk, goat ice cream. I presume it's not goat flavored. What additives?
Actually,
go?
it's vanilla bean.
Vanilla bean.
I've only been able to find one creamery in the nation that makes it, that's sold here lately, and I've had to. It's has distributor problems, and I have to keep finding the stores where it's stocked because they keep dropping it off the list.
Well, have you thought about getting an ice cream maker and goat milk?
I've been thinking about getting a goat. It would be a lot more economical.
Well, and I think that now that's a lovely bucolic image of you going out every morning to milk your goat and the baby goats frolicking about you as you go down the pathway. I like that. Next time, I'd like to have a video clip of you with the goat, if possible.
Okay, I will do that.
All right. Jen, your favorite flavor of goat or otherwise ice cream?
I'm going to say a chocolate peanut butter. I'm fond of the Baskin Robbins chocolate peanut butter and the Haagen-Dazs chocolate peanut butter. I can't eat nearly as much of it as I used to. My sweet tooth is going away, but that tends to be my go-to.
That sounds lovely. We've got one of the local, Tillamook makes a great chocolate peanut butter ice cream. So lovely. Matthew, how about you?
Yeah, we actually have an ice cream truck that comes to our street a couple of times a summer. So I find that's good for portion control. If I only have ice cream when the ice cream truck actually comes to me, and he does a very nice chocolate vanilla swirl. So it's chocolate and vanilla soft ice cream swirled together. So that's pretty much what I always get.
That sounds lovely. Well, as I said, the ice cream maker has now sort of opened up new vistas because you could basically be like, I want ice cream, and 20 minutes later you have something pretty close to ice cream. So I made cinnamon ice cream, which I really thought was lovely, and I'd meant to make an apple pie to go with it, but the ice cream didn't last long enough to make the apple pie. And I debating. I think I'm going to do like a lavender or rosemary ice cream next, which sounds that would be nice. So. Okay, we are winding on a pace, and I would like to talk about the best writing advice that you've gotten lately. And the reason that I kind of wanted to mention this is I've been reading, it's not that I've been reading Robert Heinlein lately. I've been reading either books about Heinlein or Heinlein's letters in his book, Grumbles from the Grave, and I'm working on a blog post about Heinlein. And one of the things that, for me, has been really interesting in reading these is his sort of battle to be civil to his fellow human beings and yet reserve writing time, particularly after he got kind of popular with the juveniles and had a lot of students writing to him, right? And it's very hard to turn down, some kid that writes to you and it's just like, my teacher, like, particularly when it's something where it's like, and I imagine Heinlein got this a lot, where it's, kids are like, I don't like reading, but I liked your book, because I know I've heard of a lot of people who came to science fiction through him. So that was sort of the best writing advice I've gotten in the past couple of weeks has been, do remember to defend it. Do remember that it is not the most important thing. Or that it is the most important thing. God, that all this other stuff, right, intrudes upon us, and everything seems so either alluring or so pressing, and particularly social media, and like, what's the latest controversy, and I'm going to go see what the Twitter Brexit hashtag is yielding right now, and that sort of thing. And writing time is precious. We have limited amounts of time here on this earth, and Heinlein got excuse my language, a holy crap ton done, and it was because he actually, it was interesting, like reading through it, and he'd be writing letters and be like, yeah, I was at the typewriter for 16 hours, 12 hours, 16 hours, 10 hours. And, of course, my back can't take that. I'd use a standing desk. But, I mean, the thing that I took away from it is really nose to the grindstone, my friends, is important. So, Bud, what have you gotten good writing advice this week?
Yeah. Basically, it's you have 5 short stories under development. Get your ass in the chair and finish at least one of them.
Yeah.
I won't say who said that to me.
What is your...
She's listening.
Oh, she's listening. That's pretty awesome. Well, sometimes that's what you need, right? And luckily, I have my spouse. If he's like, you're talking about these stories instead of writing them. And oh, yes, indeed, I am describing what I'm going to write instead of writing. Jen, what about you? What's the best writing advice you've gotten this last month, week, whatever?
I don't actually remember anything specific because I edited or did a friend edit of Maxwell Alexander Drake's writing book that's about to come out, and I can't distill what he put in there down to something pithy. But I have heard several times in the last couple of weeks, guard your writing time. Remember that your reader is not in your head, so what's on the page is what's on the page. And what was the other thing? I don't remember what the other thing was. It was like, guard your writing time. What's on the page is what's on the page.
So what's the title of the book that you mentioned? If it is full of use. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I got this. I shouldn't have said anything if I wasn't gonna do it. And the book is called, because I believe whatever convention's about to come up, it's not WesterCon, there's another big one that's about to come up. Where is it? Oh, mail sent.
I'm going to get a copy of, like, a clip of the Jeopardy theme for moments like this, where it starts going. Because we have this in my class periodically, where someone is looking frantically, like either we've done a writing assignment, and they're just like, oh yeah, I just had it. And, of course, they've got, like, 20, we all have, like, 20 browser windows open. There we go.
It's called Dynamic Story Creation. Or Drake's Brutal Writing Advice, which is the series title, and then Dynamic Story Creation in Plain English.
Awesome.
And Drake has written for EverQuest next. He has a fantasy series out that's really popular. He did a couple of plays, a couple of screens, scripts, and he does a lot of teaching. He teaches a lot of class at conventions and to different writing script writers and such like that. And the dynamic story creation was actually he did a very good job of showing some of the things you shouldn't do while making comments to the editor, which I was not the official editor of. I read, and I was like, yep, you are totally on par.
Oh,
I think
cool.
one was about run-on sentences, but when that one comes out, I do recommend it. It's a very, very good look at novel structure in very plain language.
Okay, cool. And so, Matthew, finish us off and tell us what your this is the last moment of the program. So no pressure here, but you need to be extra wise.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, this is going to sound very pedestrian after all of the very big things. But I like my nuts and bolts kind of writing advice. My bedtime book right now is John Gardner's The Art of Fiction, and it's got full of great stuff. Most of it is kind of on the big scale, but my favorite bit so far is very small, very nuts and bolts, and that was just watch out for participles in subordinate clauses, and that is, the ing words, like, turning around, she saw so and so, and he was just saying, you know, they're not wrong in and of themselves, but you know, when you get too many, often they weaken a sentence. So just take a look at every one of those and see if you can use it in the simple past, and odds are good it's going to be a stronger one. So I love that kind of writing advice because it means I can just go from that, I can open up my latest thing, and I can just do a quick search for ing and go through every single one and be pretty sure that when I'm done, I'm actually going to have a stronger manuscript because of it.
Well, do you know there's a book called The 10% Solution by Ken Rand, which is terrific. And one of the steps that Ken has you go through is search, because you know with the Microsoft Word feature, you can just be like ing, 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 and search on each word and look at it. And also adverbs is another one of the steps. I love that little book. It is a great little book. Patrick Swenson, if you are watching this, please have Fairwood Press put that in electronic form. I know I told you this at the Locus Awards, but God damn it, Patrick, please do it. That's my public service announcement, because it really is a very good little book, and it's the only book that I buy and give to people. Great book. All right, I think that we have come to an end. Thank you for sitting through another SFWA chat with us. There will be another one in 2 weeks. We're still kind of figuring out the time. I think the next one's going to be an evening one in order to accommodate a couple of guests that we haven't been able to previously. But we will talk about equally interesting things. We are happy to entertain viewer questions, and thank you very much. All right, guys, have a great week. Take care. Bye-bye.